Hello, so this tutorial is about getting started with tessellations on dot paper, and we're going to address different levels of tessellations to get you started. So we're going to use dotted paper for this task. So at the most easiest level, the idea of a tessellation is basically taking a shape and puzzling the pieces together, creating no gaps. So think about your bathroom tile, think about your wooden floor. There's no gaps on those spaces. Everything is really tightly knit together. They're puzzles, so they're really tightly wound, spaced together. So the simplest shape you can take is basically a square. And then all you have to do is take the square and just continue to tile it on repeat. Now you can tile it where it looks like that and then continue, it's the same shape, this is your puzzle piece. Or you can even, oops, that was a little off, you can even offset it to add a little more creative look to it. Right? You can even tilt the square. And so it looks more elegant in a different way. Now, of course, you can use more than just a square. You can also tile a rectangle. You can also tile a rhombus. Or actually, in this case, a parallelogram. You can even take an equilateral triangle. You can take a trapezium. You can even take an isosceles trapezium. So these are the easiest shapes to just begin tiling, and you can rotate it, you can flip it. So if I were to use a trapezium, I can flip it like this, and I just have to make sure, or rotate it. I just have to make sure that it tiles. And on the second line, you can again offset it, or you don't have to offset it. You can even just stack it. So that's the easiest shape. And once you have this, then you can actually be very creative with your design on the inside. Now for a beginner, more intermediate level, you can challenge yourself to play with perhaps like a L shape, like that, and allow yourself to rotate onto itself or translate. Now tessellations are combinations of rotations, translations, and reflections. So you can play with that. You again could also choose to offset it a bit, as long as you're able to puzzle it. Now in this case, that did not work very well for me, did it? So I would just erase that and start again. You can also play with a cross. Most importantly is that your tessellation follows a consistent pattern of tiling, so that way when we look at it, it seems to make sense. So that's another shape you can play with. You can even play with something like a smaller piece like this and offset it. So it's up to you. Now at the more intermediate level, what you can do is you can start playing with a basic square. So if I were to take this square, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 dots, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 dots. Now, if you want to make up your own shape, in a tessellation, to create your own shape so that it puzzles itself together, if you want to take off something on one end, you have to add it to the other end. So if I were to say I took off this piece right here, then I would add it over here. So that means I would then erase this line. Oops, let's erase that line. And erase that line. So therefore that becomes my new shape. Okay? If I were to continue doing something like that, say I wanted to take off this piece, I'd have to add it into the same location on the other side. So then I can erase this little part, and I can erase this little part. And so now there's my little shape. So then now I can go ahead and proceed trying to tessellate this. It might look something like this in the first line, and you can do the same thing on the bottom line and just continue tiling it. And there you go, that's an idea. So with intermediate level, you're basically taking a basic shape like a square and doing that. You can even play with a rectangle and do that as well. At a beginner, intermediate, advanced level, it's the same thing. You take your square, you take off a piece, maybe from the top, which then you add on to the bottom, and you erase. So you can play with not just one side, you can play with both sides as well. So this is just an example. Or if I do this and I'm going to go ahead and erase this line. I'll erase this line. And then because it was evenly distributed in the way you cut it, you can even flip it. So what I mean is that you can turn it around so that now this end goes onto this side, and that this end is going to go on this side. And then you can continue tiling it in that way and putting an intricate design on the inside. Now for a more advanced approach, what you could do is you can then you can actually take two shapes. So for example, you could take a bigger square, and you could take a smaller square, and start trying to figure out how you can tile that together. Of course, strategically, so it follows somewhat of a pattern that looks purposely laid out. Another thing that you can do that's actually also advanced is to start taking the shapes and rounding out your design. So if I were to take this square right here and say I cut off this section here, which means I have cut off this section here. Rather than just keeping them straight lines, I'm going to round it out a bit. So I round out the nose of the shape. And if I were to do the same thing down here, you round out the shape a bit. So you really have to be very purposeful in how you round it and as precise as possible so that the puzzle pieces fit together. So you'll end up with a shape that looks something like this, that then you start to tile it together and fit into each other. So your choice on what you want to do. Advanced, you can play with it, and that's it.